Good evening, everyone. This is Advocate Nikhil Wadikar. Welcome back to this lecture series that we call as Lockup Lecture Series. First of all, I thank all of you for a great response that we have received to this lecture series. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome today's speaker, a veteran jurisprudent, Justice A.R. Joshi. Justice Joshi needs no introduction at all. However, I must fulfill my obligation. During his 22 years long career as a judge, Justice A.R. Joshi has served as a special judge under Prevention of Corruption Act. During his assignment as a special judge under Prevention of Corruption Act, all the matters investigated by CBI were tried before him, which included the famous trials of Harshad Mehta and Ketan Parekh, and many other trials related to economic offences and offences pertaining to share transactions. He was also appointed as a special judge under Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Substances Act. Many of his judgments delivered under NDPS Act were upheld up to the Supreme Court. Considering his dedicated service to the judiciary, he was appointed as a judge of Bombay High Court in February 2009. He also played an important role in overall computerization of the courts in Maharashtra. He retired as a High Court judge in December 2015. After his retirement as a High Court judge, he has been taking up arbitration assignments. The topic he has selected today is practice, procedure, and case law under Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Substances Act. I request the participants to keep their microphones as well as their video off. You may post your questions in the chat box. The questions will be answered in the end. We are also live streaming on Facebook page Lockup Lecture Series. Without taking much time, I would like to request Justice A.R. Joshi to take the mic and enlighten us. Thank you.
Hello, good evening, everybody. First and foremost, I would like to thank the organizers and especially Advocate Nikhil Wadikar for hosting this webinar and inviting me to share my thoughts on the today's topic. Today's topic revolves around the Narcotic and Psychotropic Substances Act 1985. Let us have some background regarding the drug laws which were then prevailing in India prior to the promulgation of this NDPS Act 1985. The problem of drug addicts is international and the mafia is working throughout the world. It is the crime against the society and it has to be dealt with iron hands. Use of drugs by the young people in India has increased. The drugs are being used for weakening of the nation. The Supreme Court has taken judicial notice of this situation in its recent judgment in the case of Hira Singh versus Union of India. We will discuss the judgment in the course of today's webinar and not at this juncture itself. The Opium Acts of 1857 and 1878 and the Dangerous Drugs Act 1930 were the legislations exercising statutory control over narcotic drugs in India. The provisions of these enactments were found to be inadequate because of passage of time and development in the field of illicit drug traffic and drug abuse at national and international levels. Moreover, there was a need to change the law and make it stringent inasmuch as then in the earlier acts, there were minor punishments, no minimum punishment was prescribed, limited powers were given to the investigating officers, etc. As such, these were the grounds prompting the legislature to consolidate the existing laws and enact the Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Substances Act 1985. The Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Substances Bill, having been passed by both the Houses of Parliament, received the assent of the President on 16 September 1985. It came on the statute book as the Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Substances Act 1985, came into force on 14th of November 1985. The main act is amended for 3 times till date. Respectively, in the years 1988, 2001, and 2014. The amendment of 2001 was the most significant amendment carried out in the NDPS Act. Firstly, let us understand the structure of the Act in a nutshell. The Act is divided in 6 chapters. Chapter 1 contains sections 1 to 3. All the definitions are given in section 2. Some of these definitions can be mentioned here, if not all. The addict means a person who has dependence on any narcotic drug or psychotropic substance. Another definition is, which is important and can be discussed here, is the controlled delivery. Controlled delivery means the technique of allowing illicit or suspect consignments of narcotic drugs, psychotropic substances, controlled substances, or substances substituted for them to pass out of or through or into the territory of India with the knowledge and under the supervision of an officer empowered in this behalf or duly authorized under section 50A with a view to identifying the persons involved in the commission of an offense under the Act. To state briefly, the other important definitions are for the cannabis, that is charas and ganja, coca derivatives, ecognine, cocaine, coca leaf. Narcotic drug is also defined as the leaf, cannabis, hemp, opium, poppy, straw, and includes any manufactured goods. Opium derivatives, opium poppy, and poppy straw are also defined, and so also the psychotropic substance is defined as an substance, natural or synthetic, or any natural material or any salt or preparation of such substance or material included in the list of psychotropic substances specified in the schedule. Here, one must understand that the definition of psychotropic substance do mention only those substances which are mentioned in the schedule, and the schedule gives the names. So in the definition, the names are not given. Various other terms are also defined, such as manufacture, import, export, interstate, and out of India. However, so far as the present lecture and the present subject is concerned, we may not discuss these aspects of manufacture, import, export, interstate, and out of India. We will mainly discuss the various provisions regarding the penalties and mainly the mandatory provisions. The next chapter is chapter 2, which comprises of sections 4 to 7. It deals with the authorities and officers to take measures in the matters of implementation of the provisions of the Act, search, seizures, arrests, investigations, and matters related to international conventions, addicts, and scientific usage, etc. The next chapter is chapter 2A, which deals with the National Fund for Control of Narcotic Abuse. Section 7A and 7B are mentioned in the said chapter 2A. Overview of the other chapters is such that chapter 3 consists of sections 8 to 14 and deals with prohibition, control, and regulation. Chapter 4 consists of sections 15 to section 40 and deals with the offenses and penalties. Chapter 5 consists of sections 41 to 68 and deals with the procedural aspects. In our lecture today, we will discuss this chapter rather in length in the light of the decisions of the apex court. The next chapter is chapter 5A, which consists of section 68A to 68Z. It deals with the forfeiture of illegally acquired property. The chapter 6 consists of sections 69 to 83 and deals with miscellaneous provisions. Out of these miscellaneous provisions, some provisions can be mentioned briefly. Section 69 is the protection of the action taken in good faith. It is in fact the protection given to the officers while doing investigation and taking search and seizure. If the officers act in a good faith, then there is a legal protection and the immunity given to such officers. Section 76 is the rule-making power of the central government, and Section 78 is the rule-making power of the state government. Section 80 deals with the application of the Drug and Cosmetic Act 1940. That application of this act is not barred. This provision lays down that NDPS Act will be in addition to and not in derogation of the Drugs and Cosmetics Act 1940. The interplay between the provisions of these two acts has also been subject matter of a Supreme Court decision, which will be discussed in the latter part of this lecture. Now, before discussing some of the most important provisions of the NDPS Act, along with the relevant case law, it is important to bear in mind that the NDPS Act underwent a major amendment in the year 2001. Excuse me. The NDPS Act 1985 contemplates severe and deterrent punishment as is evident from the minimum term of imprisonment prescribed in section 21 and 22 of the NDPS Act 1985. It was found that large number of cases in which the accused were found to be in possession of small quantity of drugs were really cases of drug addicts and not traffickers in narcotic drugs and psychotropic substances. As a result of a stringent bail provision, there were hardly any cases where such persons could obtain bail. That the trials were pending for long periods and the accused languished in jail. At this juncture, I remember one matter before me, sometime in the year 1988 or 89, in which one young lady was arrested by the Narcotic Control Bureau on prior information, and after complying the provisions of section 50 as to apprising her of her rights of taking her search in presence of a magistrate or a gazetted officer, her search was conducted by a lady officer as it is a mandate of the law. During the search, some pouches of white powder were found. The powder was tested on the kit and it was found to be heroin. Total weight of the contraband was hardly 3 to 4 grams, but it was the scenario prior to the amendment of 2001. So there was no alternative before me when the prosecution proved its case that the possession with the accused woman, and then whether the quantity was 3 grams, still the punishment was minimum for the offense under section 21 of the NDPS Act, and I awarded her the punishment of 10 years, which is the minimum, and fine of rupees 10 lakhs. The situation is that there was nothing like small quantity or commercial quantity, and there was no distinction. So this is in fact the stage. Then subsequently, in the amendment of the year 2011, certain restrictions were made, and in fact, the punishment was altered if the quantity was less, and if at all it is for the personal consumption of the accused person. Now coming to the provisions of our Act, under Section 27 of the Act of 1985, there was a marginal concession in favor of a drug addict by providing a reduced quantum of punishment if the accused could prove that the narcotic drug or the psychotropic substance in his possession was intended for his personal consumption and not for sale or distribution. The amended Act, by way of amending Act 9 of 2001, rationalized the structure of the punishment under the Act by providing graded sentence linked to the quantity of the narcotic or psychotropic substance in relation to which the offense was committed. The application of strict bail provisions was also restricted only to those offenders who indulged in serious offenses. In fact, the case which I discussed earlier regarding the woman convicted by me for only 3 or 4 grams, in fact, the case started after the conclusion of the investigation and filing of the charge sheet, and for more than 2.5 years, the woman was in custody, and afterwards, the case was decided. So there was no bail provision. The bail provisions were very stringent then. The Act introduced the concept of commercial quantity as per the new amendment of 2001. Commercial quantity in relation to the narcotics and psychotropic substances by adding clause Roman 8a in section 2, which defines this term as any quantity greater than the quantity specified by central government by notification in the official gazette. Further, the expression small quantity is defined in section 2, subsection Roman 23a, as any quantity lesser than the quantity specified in the notification. Under the rationalized sentencing structure, the punishment would vary depending on whether the quantity of offending material was small quantity, commercial quantity, or something in between. This is the effect of the rationalization of sentencing structure carried out by the Amending Act of 2001 in section 27. Apart from these provisions, the Act of 2001 introduced further amendments by substituting the new section for old section 27 of 1985 Act. The new provision, section 32B, was inserted by the Amending Act 9 of 2001, which prescribes the factors to be taken into account for imposing higher than the minimum punishment. Section 41 to 43, which are substituted by amendment, deal with the power of issuing warrant and authorization, power of entry, search, seizure, and arrest without warrant or authorization. The power of seizure and arrest in public places. Significant changes were also made in section 54 of the Act, which deals with the presumption to be applied in a trial under the Act arising from the possession of illegal articles. So this was in respect of the Amending Act 2001. Now, let us discuss some of the important provisions of the NDPS Act. I request Nikhil, please display Section 8 of the NDPS Act. Yes, okay. Yes. Thank you. We may read the section. Section 8, prohibition of certain operations. No person shall cultivate any coca plant or gather any portion of coca plant or cultivate the opium poppy or any cannabis plant, or this is important subsection C, produce, manufacture, possess, sell, purchase, transport, warehouse, use, consume, import interstate, export interstate, import into India, export from India, or transship any narcotic drug or psychotropic substance except for medical or scientific purposes by the provisions of this act or the rules or orders made thereunder, and in a case where any such provision imposes any requirement by way of license, permit, or authorization, also in accordance with the terms and conditions of such license, permit, or authorization. The said provision, more particularly subsection 3, which we just read, therefore read with section 80 of the NDPS Act, read with certain rules of the NDPS Rules 1985, have been a subject matter of several decisions of various high courts and the Supreme Court. We will discuss this aspect later during the course of this lecture. Prior to amendment of 2015 to the NDPS rules, Rule 64 prohibited each of the activities specified under Section 8C of the Act, dealing in all psychotropic substances specified in Schedule 1 of the rules. Whereas Rule 65 stipulated that with reference to the psychotropic substances other than those specified in Schedule 1, to the rules could be manufactured subject to the limitations specified under Rule 65. In other words, notwithstanding the prohibition under Section 8C, the central government in exercise of its power under Section 9 permits the manufacturer of those psychotropic substances other than specified in Schedule 1 to the rules. Rule 66 mandated that no person shall possess any narcotic substance for any of the purposes covered by the rules unless he is lawfully authorized to possess such substance for any of the said purposes under these rules. Now I will request Nikhil, please display the citations for Section 8. Hello, Nikhil.
Yes, sir. Can you see the citation?
Yes. Okay. Following the law laid down by the Supreme Court of India in state of Uttaranchal versus Rajesh Kumar Gupta, the Bombay High Court had held that the absence of mention of a particular psychotropic substance in Schedule 1 to the rules excludes the application of Section 8, notwithstanding the fact that such drug is included in the schedule to the Act. Various other high courts had also held to this effect. When the Bombay High Court decision was carried in appeal to the Supreme Court doubted the correctness of its own decision in the Rajesh Gupta's case, and the said matter was referred to the larger bench. The larger bench of the Supreme Court decided this issue in the case of Union of India versus Sanjeev Deshpande. I think this is the displayed decision. Yes, The Supreme Court held that dealing in narcotic drugs and psychotropic substances is permissible only when such dealing is for medical purposes or scientific purposes. Further, it was held that the mere fact that the dealing in narcotic drugs and psychotropic substances is for a medical or scientific purpose does not by itself lift the embargo created under Section 8C. Such a dealing must be in the manner and extent provided by the provisions of the Act, rules, and orders made thereunder. Section 9 and 10 enable the central and the state governments, respectively, to make rules permitting and regulating various aspects contemplated under Section 8C of dealing in narcotic drugs and psychotropic substances. The Supreme Court went on to observe that the Act does not contemplate framing of rules for prohibiting various activities of dealing in narcotic drugs and psychotropic substances. Such prohibition is already contained in Section 8C. It only contemplates of framing of the rules for permitting and regulating any activity of dealing in narcotic drugs or psychotropic substances. Therefore, the Supreme Court opined that the conclusion reached by the various high courts that prohibition contained under Section 8 is not attracted in respect of all the psychotropic substances which find a mention in the schedule to the Act, but not in the Schedule 1 to the rules framed under the Act is untenable. This decision was recently followed by the Supreme Court in the case of State of Punjab versus Rakesh Kumar. Nikhil, please, you can display that another decision, State of Punjab versus Rakesh Kumar, wherein the Supreme Court has confirmed the position in law that accused found in possession of manufactured drugs can be tried under NDPS Act in place of Drugs and Cosmetics Act. In that case, the accused were apprehended with manufactured drugs and convicted by the trial court under Sections 21 and 22 of Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Substances Act 1985. Aggrieved by the conviction and the sentence, the accused approached the High Court. During the pendency of appeals, the High Court suspended their sentence, observing that manufactured drugs, be it contain narcotic drugs, psychotropic substances, must be tried under the Drugs and Cosmetics Act 1940. The state carried that decision to the Appellate Court. On perusal of the matter, the Supreme Court was of the opinion that the judgment of the High Court was untenable. Analyzing the objectives of the two acts, it was observed, while Drugs and Cosmetics Act deals with the drugs which are intended to be used for therapeutic or medicinal use, the NDPS Act intends to curb and penalize the usage of drugs which are used for intoxication or for getting a stimulant effect. In that case, accused were found in bulk possession of manufactured drugs without valid authorization. It was noted that Section 80 of NDPS Act provides that the provisions of the Act are in addition to and not in derogation of Drugs and Cosmetics Act. Nikhil, please display Section 32B of the NDPS Act. Yes, thank you. Section 32B sets out the factors to be taken into account for imposing higher than the minimum punishment for any offense committed under the NDPS Act. As you can see, the crucial expression used in this provision is take into account, which indicates that the factors listed here are not exhaustive. Nevertheless, the interpretation of this section fell for consideration before the Supreme Court in the case of Rafiq Qureshi versus NCB Eastern Zonal Unit. This authority may be shown on the screen for the advantage of the viewers. Yes, Supreme Court considered whether the court could give higher punishment than the minimum in the absence of any of the enumerated factors, or whether it could take into account any other factor which is not mentioned in section 32b to award the punishment higher than the minimum punishment prescribed for any offense. Considering the statutory scheme, the Supreme Court specifically opined that the decision to impose a punishment higher than the minimum is not confined or limited to the factors enumerated in clause A to F. The court's discretion to consider such factors as it may deem fit is not taken away or tinkered. Let us explain this scenario. For example, in the case a person is found in possession of manufactured drug whose quantity is equivalent to the commercial quantity, the punishment for such offense as per section 21C has to be not less than 10 years, which may extend to 20 years. But suppose the quantity of the manufactured drug is 20 times of the commercial quantity, it may be a relevant factor to impose punishment higher than the minimum. Thus, the quantity of the substance with which an accused is charged is a relevant factor which can be taken into consideration while fixing the quantum of the punishment. Clause A to F. Nikhil, can you show again section 32? Yes. Clauses A to F, as enumerated in section 32b, do not enumerate any factor regarding quantity of the substance as a factor for determining the punishment. This is an important case law to be borne in mind by the prosecutors and also the defense advocates alike. It would assist the prosecutors to canvass before the court on the basis of the facts and circumstances of the case as to why the court needs to award a punishment higher than the minimum punishment. On the other hand, equally, authority can be taken recourse to by the defense lawyers, and they can attempt to prevail upon the court by showing how there are no factors whatever to justify an award of punishment higher than the minimum prescribed. The next important provision is section 35. Nikhil, please display section 35 for the benefit of the viewers. Yes. One. Let us analyze this section 35. The provisions would be at once reveal that the prosecution under NDPS Act carries a reverse burden of proof with the culpable mental state of the accused. He is presumed to be guilty consequent to recovery of contraband from him, and it is for the accused to establish his innocence, unlike the normal rule of criminal jurisprudence that an accused is presumed to be innocent unless proved guilty. The general principle of the criminal jurisprudence, as all you advocates and the persons related to the legal field know that the accused is presumed to be innocent unless he is proved guilty. However, this does not absolve the prosecution from establishing the prima facie case, though there is a presumption envisaged by Section 35 of the NDPS Act that it is the burden on the accused to establish his innocence when, in fact, the possession and the conscious possession is proved by the prosecution. As such, though this was a special enactment, establishing a prima facie case is necessary, and whereafter the burden shifts to the accused. If the prosecution fails to prove the fundamental facts so as to attract the rigors of Section 35 of the Act, the actus reus, which is possession of contraband by the accused, cannot be said to have been established. Because there is a reverse burden of proof, the prosecution shall be put to the stricter test of compliance with the mandatory provisions. If at any stage the accused is able to create a reasonable doubt as a part of his defense to rebut the presumption of his guilt, the benefit will naturally have to go to him. This law has been laid down by the Supreme Court in the case of Noor Agha versus State of Punjab, and subsequently confirmed in Hanif Khan versus Central Bureau of Narcotics. I request Nikhil, please. Yes, thank you. Noor Agha versus State of Punjab and Hanif Khan versus Central Bureau of Narcotics. However, at this point, it is important to bear in mind that once the possession of the contraband by the accused has been established by the prosecution, by establishing the fundamental facts, it is for the accused to discharge the onus of proof that he was not in conscious possession. The burden of proof cast on the accused under Section 35 of the NDPS Act can be discharged through different modes. One of such modes is that the accused can rely on the material available in the prosecution case, raising doubts about the prosecution case itself. The defense advocate can elicit answers from the prosecution witness through cross-examination and can create a strong doubt in the prosecution version. Also, the accused may adduce other evidence when he is called upon to enter on his defense. Thirdly, if the circumstances appearing in the prosecution case give reasonable assurance to the court that the accused could not have had the knowledge of the required intention, the burden cast on him under Section 35 of the Act would stand discharged, even if the accused had not adduced any other evidence of his own when he is called upon to enter on his defense. In simple words, it can be said that always the accused need not enter into his defense. By keeping mum only, he can succeed if the case of the prosecution is not based on sound and solid foundation. If there is a doubt regarding the recovery and the conscious possession from the person of the accused or from the tenement, etc., then it can be said that the prosecution case get defeated intrinsically. So though there is a mandate of section 35, still it is the requirement of the prosecution first to establish that there was a conscious possession with the accused. Now coming to the other aspects, the practitioner in the NDPS cases should study the Supreme Court decisions in the cases of Abdul Rashid Ibrahim Mansoori, State of Gujarat, and Baldev Singh versus State of Haryana. I request Nikhil, please display these decisions. Abdul Rashid Ibrahim Mansoori versus State of Gujarat and Baldev Singh versus State of Haryana. These two decisions can be gone through by the prosecutors or the persons conducting the prosecution in NDPS cases. Now, next important provision is section 37. In a number of decisions, the Supreme Court has settled the position in law that the conditions mentioned in section 37 are cumulative and not alternative. In other words, apart from giving the public prosecutor an opportunity of being heard, the other twin conditions also have to be satisfied for the purpose of enlarging the accused on bail. The satisfaction contemplated regarding the accused being not guilty has to be based on reasonable grounds. The expression reasonable grounds means something more than prima facie grounds. It contemplates substantial probable causes for believing that the accused is not guilty of the alleged offense. The reasonable belief contemplated in the provisions required existence of some facts and circumstances as are sufficient in themselves to justify satisfaction that the accused is not guilty of the alleged offense and he is not likely to commit any offense while on bail. This nature of embargo seems to have been envisaged keeping in view the deleterious nature of the offense necessitates of the public interest and the normal tendencies of the persons involved in such network to pursue their activities with greater vigor and make hay when at large. The important decisions of the Supreme Court in this regard are Union of India versus Commission Rai and Union of India versus Ram Samuj and others. And third, Narcotic Control Bureau versus Dilip Namade. Nitin, please show and display these decisions if available. Yes, thank you. The Supreme Court in the later decision delivered on 24 January 2020 in the case of State of Kerala and others versus Rajesh and others has gone to the observe that while considering the bail applications in NDPS matters, a liberal approach is uncalled for. See, bear in mind that this is in fact rather deviation from the general connotation in law that the bail is a rule and the jail is an exception so far as other IPC offenses are concerned. Here, the Supreme Court has categorically mentioned that so far as the offenses under the NDPS Act are concerned, then the there should not be a liberal approach in granting bail to the accused person. At this juncture, it may be mentioned that the Probation of Offenders Act is applicable to certain offences. Section 39 deals with the power of the court to release certain offenders on probation. Section 39. Nikhil, can you please display the section 39 if available? Let us read this section as it is in fact a different type of provision, though the offences under NDPS Act are very grave. Still, there is a liberal approach so far as the application of Probation of Offenders Act. Power of the court to release certain offenders on probation. When any addict is found guilty of any offense punishable under section 27 or for the offenses relating to small quantities of any narcotic drug or psychotropic substance, and if the court by which he is found guilty is of the opinion regard being had to his age, character, antecedents, or physical or mental condition of the offender, that it is expedient so to do, then notwithstanding anything contained in this act or any other law for the time being in force, the court may, instead of sentencing him at once to any imprisonment with his consent, direct that he be released for undergoing a medical treatment. This is in fact a procedure of rehabilitation of drug addicts. He has to undergo a medical treatment for detoxification or de-addiction from a hospital or an institution maintained or recognized by the government, and on his entering into a bond in the form prescribed by the central government, with or without sureties, to appear and furnish before the court within the period not exceeding 1 year the report regarding the result of his medical treatment. In the meantime, to abstain from the commission of any offense under chapter 4. So this is in fact a special provision in which, without undergoing a sentence, a person is released on his own bond with or without sureties, considering the nature and conduct and the stature of the person. Subsection 2 says, if it appears to the court, having regard to the report regarding the result of the medical treatment furnished under subsection 1, that it is expedient so to do, the court may direct the release of the offender after due admonition on his entering into a bond in the form prescribed by the central government without sureties, for abstaining from the commission of any offense under chapter 4 during such period not exceeding 3 years, as the court may deem fit to specify, or on his failure so to abstain, to appear before the court and receive the sentence when called upon during such period. So in fact, in short, it can be said that the offender can be released on probation and also for undergoing a medical treatment for de-addiction and detoxification. And after the medical report is received, it is for the court to decide whether to release him on admonition of after taking a bond with or without sureties from him, and also with the understanding that the accused will not indulge into commission of any offense under the chapter 4 of the NDPS Act. Now we come to the important section of the Act, and it is section 50, provisions of section 50. Yes, they are on the screen. This is perhaps the most important provision in the NDPS Act and also probably the most discussed provision by the constitutional courts of the country. Section 50, for the sake of advantage, we can read this section in its entirety. Section 50, conditions under which the search of a person shall be conducted. 1. When any officer duly authorized under section 42 is about to search any person under the provisions of section 41, section 42, or section 43, he shall, if such person so requires, take such person without unnecessary delay to the nearest gazetted officer of any of the departments mentioned in section 42 or to the nearest magistrate. 2. If such requisition is made, the officer may detain the person until he can bring him before the gazetted officer or the magistrate referred to in subsection 1. 3. The gazetted officer or the magistrate before whom any such person is brought shall, if he sees no reasonable ground for search, forthwith discharge the person, but otherwise shall direct that the search be conducted. No female shall be searched by anyone excepting a female. When an officer duly authorized under section 42 has reason to believe that it is not possible to take the person to be searched to the nearest gazetted officer or magistrate without the possibility of the person to be searched parting with the possession of any narcotic drug or psychotropic substance or controlled substance or article or document, he may instead of taking such person to the nearest gazetted officer or magistrate, proceed to search the person as provided under section 100 of the Code of Criminal Procedure 1973. After a search is conducted under subsection 5, the officer shall record the reason for such belief which necessitated such search and within 72 hours send a copy thereof to his immediate official superior. So far as these provisions of subsection 5 of section 50 is concerned, I must tell that during my tenure as a special judge under the NDPS Act during the years since 1993, that is since I joined the City Civil and Sessions Court Mumbai as the additional session judge until nearly about 2004-2005, not a single case was brought before me in which there was the occasion to take the accused person before the magistrate or the gazetted officer. It is in fact surprising, but in almost all means 100% all cases where the search was conducted by the raiding party officers itself on the pretext that the accused did not choose for taking him before the magistrate or the gazetted officer. In fact, it can be seen that the investigating officers then were completely relying on this subsection 5 of section 50. Now coming to the decision of the Apex Court, in the recent decision of the Supreme Court in the case of Arif Khan versus State of Uttarakhand, Supreme Court has reiterated and settled the position of law Nikhil, can you please show this authority if available? Arif Khan versus State of Uttarakhand,
Yes, sir, it's there on
quoted
the
in
screen.
2018 18 Supreme Court cases 380. If it is there, okay. Yes. In this matter, the Supreme Court has reiterated the settled position of law that Section 50 of NDPS Act is a mandatory provision. The alleged recovery search of the contraband surus made by the raiding party police from the accused body was not done in accordance with the procedure prescribed under Section 50 of NDPS Act. That is the imperative on the part of the police officer to apprise the person intended to be searched of his right under Section 50 to be searched only before a gazetted officer or a magistrate. It was held that it is equally mandatory on the part of the authorized officer to make the suspect aware of the existence of his right to be searched before the gazetted officer or a magistrate, if so required by him, and this requires a strict compliance. It is ruled that the suspect person may or may not choose to exercise the right provided to him under Section 50 of NDPS Act. But so far as the officer is concerned, the obligation is cast upon him under Section 50 of NDPS Act to apprise the suspect of his right to be searched before a magistrate or a gazetted officer. The aforesaid principle is in case where the recovery of an illicit drug is made from the person of the accused. Here, the crucial aspect which is required to be borne in mind that the provisions of Section 50 and the exercising of the right by the accused as to whether he wanted his search to be taken before a gazetted officer or a nearest magistrate only arises whenever there is a case of a personal search. If the search and seizure is not from the person of the accused, then there is no need of observance of mandatory provision of Section 50 as to apprising the accused of his right. It is important to know that there are cases where the recovery is done from both, that is the person of the accused and also from the property of the accused, such as residential or office premises or a vehicle or a container or a bag. In such cases, the Supreme Court has consistently held that insofar as the search and seizures of a property is concerned, non-compliance of Section 50 is immaterial. In cases where the prosecution rests on recovery of the illicit drug from the person of an accused as well as from the property of the accused, the Supreme Court has clearly laid down that if recovery of illicit drug from the property of the accused is independently and successfully established, then it is immaterial if there was a non-compliance of Section 50 insofar as the recovery from the search of the person of the accused is concerned. So in fact, this is very important decision and the observations of the Supreme Court as to when there are two types of searches, one from the person of the accused, that is from his pant pocket or shirt pocket or from any pocket attached to his person, and there is also a search and seizure of narcotic contraband from his house or from his office. Then if at all there is any violation of section 50 of NDPS Act so far as the personal search of the accused is concerned, still the prosecution shall not fail and the accused can be tried for the offense of having found in possession of narcotic contraband or narcotic substance from the premises belonging to him. For the benefit of the legal practitioners, the advocates, the following few authorities are of much importance, and the practitioners should study the following judgments carefully. I request Nikhil to please display the said decisions for the benefit of the viewers. Kalema Tamba versus State of Maharashtra, etc. Yes, okay. I need not read each and every decision as they are being shown on the screen to the viewers. It is important that the ratios propounded by the apex court in these authorities are of much importance, and the legal practitioners are requested to go through the decisions as they are helpful in dealing with the cases under NDPS Act. Now we will come to section 57. I request Nikhil to please display section 57. Whenever any person makes any arrest or seizure under this act, he shall within 48 hours next after such arrest or seizure make a full report of all the particulars of such arrest or seizure to his immediate official superior. The Supreme Court has held that the requirement of making a report within 48 hours is merely a discretionary, is directionary and not a mandatory provision. When I was dealing with the NDPS cases, during the course of the arguments, learned advocates for the accused vehemently argued and submitted before me that there is no compliance of section 57 of the NDPS Act, as the report of the search and seizure and all the particulars have not been sent to the immediate superior officer. However, considering the decision and the mandate given by the apex court, this is only a directory section and not mandatory. The effect of non-compliance of section 50 is required to be viewed by the courts in the light of the other attending circumstances and the evidence, and in order to get oneself assured whether really the accused is involved in the offense or not. So far as section 50 is concerned, definitely it can be said that non-compliance of section 50, there is no alternative but to give the benefit to the accused, as in fact the entire prosecution vitiates so far as the recovery under section 50 is concerned. The Supreme Court has held that the requirement of making a report under section 57 of the Act within 48 hours is in fact not mandatory. As we already seen, the authorities which can be shown to the viewers: Sajan Abraham versus State of Kerala and Gurmel Chand versus State of Punjab. In Gurmel Chand versus State of Punjab, this is the Supreme Court judgment dated 23rd January 2020, in the criminal appeal number 149 of 2020. So in fact, this is very latest and fresh decision of the Apex Court. Now let us turn to the interesting point of confessions under the NDPS Act. In fact, this is also a very crucial aspect while dealing with the matters under the NDPS Act, and it is equally important to the judges and also to the practitioners, that is the prosecutors conducting the cases on behalf of the state, and also the defense lawyers defending the accused persons. Section 67. Nikhil, please display section 67. Powers to call for information, etc. Can you hear me, Nikhil? Section 67, if available, you can show. Any officer referred to in section 42 who is authorized in this behalf by the central government or a state government may, during the course of any inquiry in connection with the contravention of any provisions of this act, A, call for information from any person for the purpose of satisfying himself whether there has been any contravention of the provisions of this act or any rules made thereunder. B, require any person to produce or deliver any document or thing useful or relevant to the inquiry. C, examine any person acquainted with the facts and circumstances of the case. This we are dealing with section 67 of NDPS Act. On this aspect, the Supreme Court in Rajkumar Karwal's case and Kanhaiyalal versus Union of India has laid down that an officer vested with the powers of an officer in charge of a police station under section 53 of the NDPS Act is not a police officer within the meaning of section 25 of the Evidence Act. Supreme Court further held that the statement made under section 67 of the NDPS Act is not the same as the statement made under section 161 of Criminal Procedure Code, unless made under threat or coercion. It is this vital difference which allows a statement made under section 67 of the NDPS Act to be used as a confession against the person making it and excludes it from the operation of sections 24 to 27 of the Evidence Act. This is in fact a special enactment as to the use of section 6 statements recorded under section 67 of the Act during the trial of an offender under the NDPS Act. However, there were controversial views expressed by different high courts. The decision in Kanhaiyalal's case was doubted by the Supreme Court in the case of Nirmal Singh Pehlwan, which is reported in 2011, 12 Supreme Court cases, page 298. Further, in Tufan Singh versus State of Tamil Nadu, the Supreme Court was of the view that the matter required consideration and therefore directed that the matter be placed before a larger bench. The point that is referred for consideration is whether the officer investigating the matter under NDPS Act would qualify as police officer or not. Further, another point that has been referred is whether the statement recorded by the investigating officer under section 67 of the NDPS Act can be treated as confessional statement or not, even if the officer is not treated as a police officer. At the present moment, the said reference is pending and awaiting the decision from the apex court. In view of the pending reference, in the cases that are being decided by the Supreme Court, it has been proceeding with the assumption that the confession made under section 67 of the NDPS Act is admissible in evidence. So till the time the reference is answered in one way or the other, the legal position is that the section 67, the statement under section 67 is admissible in evidence. While doing so, however, the Supreme Court has laid down that the court has to satisfy that such statement is a voluntary statement, free from any pressure, and that the accused is apprised of all his rights before recording the confessional statement. And this is the mandate given by the apex court in the decision in Mohammed Fasreen state. In the cases under the NDPS Act involving more than one accused, where an accused is implicated a co-accused confession, the Supreme Court has laid down the law in Surinder Kumar Khanna versus intelligence officer. The Supreme Court has laid down that confessional statements of a co-accused cannot by itself be taken as a substantive piece of evidence against another co-accused and could at the best be used or utilized in order to lend assurance to the other evidence which is there against such co-accused. In the absence of any substantive evidence, it would be inappropriate to base the conviction of the appellant purely on the statements of the co-accused. These were the observations of the apex court in Surinder Kumar Khanna case. The Supreme Court thus reiterated the position that the confession cannot be made the foundation of a conviction and can only be used in support of other evidence. One more important point needs to be discussed here from the perspective of practicing advocates and prosecutors. The question whether non-production of seized contraband before the magistrate or in a trial is fatal to the case of the prosecution has been deliberated by the Supreme Court in many of its decisions. The Supreme Court has laid down that this question has to be answered on the facts and circumstances of each case. It has been held that non-production of seized contraband before the court is not always fatal. Of course, the facts and circumstances of each case are required to be weighed and sifted, and then the court has to deal with the matter accordingly. If the seizure of the material is otherwise proved on the record and is not even doubted or disputed, the entire contraband material need not be placed before the court. If the seizure is otherwise not in doubt, there is no requirement that the entire material ought to be produced before the court. At times, the material could be so bulky. For example, some seized contraband runs into several and hundreds of kilograms. I remember one case which is of the year 1998 or 99, when I was dealing with the cases under the Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Substances Act at City Civil and Sessions Court, Mumbai. There were total 11 to 12 accused persons involved in the offense, and the matter was investigated and complaint was brought before me by Narcotic Control Bureau. Initially, the case started on the information received by the NCB from its sources, and the raid was conducted apparently at the premises, if I remember correctly, at the Jewel of India Hotel at Varali, in the precincts of one auditorium there, and also in a jeep. There were more than 300 kilograms of Bandrex tablets were found, and they were seized under Panchanama. The jeep was found abandoned. There was no clue. Nobody was in the jeep. However, from the registration documents of the jeep, the owner was traced out, and on his interrogation, the investigating agency could trace out total 12 accused persons, including few of them being foreign nationals. 3 or 4 persons were Nigerians, 2 were from Pakistan, and others were Indians. One manufacturer of the drugs was also found, and all were tried. In fact, in that matter, the drugs, bulky in quantity, they were not brought before me, and then subsequently they were destroyed as per the provisions contained in the Act and the rules. Now coming to the present part of our discussion. If the seizure is otherwise proved, what is required to be proved is the fact that the samples taken from and out of the contraband material were kept intact, that when the samples were submitted for forensic examination, the seals were intact, that the report of the forensic experts show the potency, nature and quality of the contraband material, and that based on such material, the essential ingredients constituting the offense are made out. However, in the cases where there is a serious doubt or dispute about the seizure, or where there is no evidence to connect the forensic report with the substance that was seized, then such non-production can be fatal, and the benefit has to be given to the accused, as the prosecution would then have failed to prove the fundamental facts. Again, I remember one matter while dealing with the NDPS cases. One accused person was brought by the police machinery on the allegation that he was found in possession of 1 kilogram of heroin. The quantity was very huge, and in fact, it was prior to even the amendment of 1988. And in fact, prior to 2001 also. As per the procedure, the accused was remanded and remained in jail. The samples were sent for forensic science laboratory analysis. FSL Kalina was the forensic science laboratory. The lab report was produced before May. After about 7 or 8 months, and the police came with a report that no offense under any of the provisions of the NDPS Act can be applied against the accused, and they sought for the release of the accused, and in fact, in terms, the discharge. The reason was that the report of the laboratory was that it was plain and simple calcium carbonate, CaCO3. The color of calcium carbonate is also white. The color of pure heroin, which is crystalline, is also white. The samples were taken and the field testing kit show that it was heroin. But now on the complete analysis of the substance, it was found to be chalk powder. There was no alternate before May than to immediately call for the accused person, though he was not that time knowing what was the result of the chemical analysis. And after he was brought before me from the jail authorities, suo motu the action was taken and he was discharged from the matter. In fact, the case was closed as for want of deficient evidence. Now coming back to our topic, for proving the offense under NDPS Act, it is necessary for the prosecution to establish the quantity of the contraband goods allegedly seized from the possession of the accused, and the best evidence would be the production of the contraband before the magistrate and deposit the same before the destruction of such contraband. In order to understand this point, for the sake of the viewers and the advocates and the persons concerning the cases under NDPS Act, the following cases need to be read cumulatively to understand the law on this point. I request Nikhil to please display those cases, starting from the case Jitendra and another versus State of MP, up to the case Khan Kaur versus State of Haryana, that is last Supreme Court decision dated 2nd March 2020 in criminal appeal 2172 of 2011. In fact, this is the last decision available on this aspect, as it is of March 2020. Now we come to the special provisions for the addicts. Possession of drugs is itself an offense under the NDPS Act, as much as sale, purchase, production, etc. The punishment does not depend on whether the possession or purchase is for personal use or for the resale, but depends on the quantity of the drug. Consumption of a drug is an offense under section 27 of NDPS Act and is punishable with imprisonment of up to 1 year, and in case of some drugs, or 6 months in case of all other drugs. However, addicts volunteering for treatment get immunity under section 64 of the Act. Earlier we discussed about the admonition. Now it is the immunity from the prosecution itself. Section 64A. Immunity from prosecution to addicts volunteering for treatment. Any addict who is charged with an offense punishable under Section 27 or with the offenses involving small quantity of narcotic drugs or psychotropic substances, who voluntarily seeks to undergo medical treatment for re-addiction, de-addiction from the hospital or an institution maintained or recognized by the government or a local authority, and undergoes such treatment, shall not be liable to prosecution under Section 27 or under any other section for offences involving small quantity of narcotics or psychotropic substances, provided that the said immunity from the prosecution may be withdrawn if the addict does not undergo the complete treatment for de-addiction. This section provides immunity to the addict not only for consumption under Section 27, but also for the offences involving small quantity of drugs. Now, prior to concluding this present lecture, let us talk something about the punishments. Punishments for the offences. NDPS Act views drug offences as very serious and penalties are very strict. The quantum of sentence and the fine varies with the offences. For many offences, the penalty depends on the quantity of the drug involved. This is in fact the scenario after the important amendment of the year 2001. As I earlier said, prior to these amendments, there was no differentiation considering the quantum of punishment and the quantum of the contraband seized from the accused. Even for 1 or 2 grams of heroin, the minimum punishment of 10 years was required to have been imposed, and which has been in fact done by the officers, by the courts. So now after the amendment, as we see, for many offences, the penalty depends on the quantity of the drug involved. Small quantity, more than small, but less than the commercial quantity, or commercial quantity of drugs. Small and commercial quantities are notified for each drug. Under NDPS Act, abatement, criminal conspiracy, and even attempts to commit an offense attract the same punishment as the offense itself. Even the preparation to commit an offense attract half of the penalty. Repeat offenses attract 1.5 times the penalty, and in some cases, death penalty. Since the penalties under this act are very stiff, several procedural safeguards have been provided in the act. Some immunities are also available under the act. Those safeguards we have already discussed earlier regarding the mandatory provisions, and mainly the provision of Section 50 of the NDPS Act. Now we are nearing the conclusion. Lastly, it would be relevant to discuss the latest decision of the Supreme Court in the case of Hira Singh and others versus Union of India. Nikhil, you can please display this citation for the benefit of the viewers. It is the decision given by the Apex Court on 22nd April 2020 in the criminal appeal number 722 of 2017, along with other connected appeals. In this decision, the Supreme Court has held that in case of seizure of mixture of narcotic drugs and psychotropic substances with one or more natural substances, the quantity of natural substances is not to be excluded and to be taken into consideration along with the actual content by weight of the offending drug. While determining the small or commercial quantity of the narcotic drugs or psychotropic substances. This significant decision overrules the earlier decision in E. Michael Raj versus Intelligence Officer, Narcotic Control Bureau, which had laid down that in the mixture of a narcotic drugs or psychotropic substances with one or more natural substances, the quantity of the natural substances is not to be taken into consideration while determining the small quantity or the commercial quantity of a narcotic drug or psychotropic substance. And only the actual content by weight of the offending narcotic drug is to be considered. The Supreme Court has thus laid down that the purity of the narcotic drug or psychotropic substance which is seized is immaterial. See, this is a very crucial decision of the Apex Court, as invariably there is a defense raised by the accused that though allegedly the contraband narcotic drug or psychotropic substance of about 1 kilogram is recovered at the instance of the accused person, or it is found from his person. In fact, the laboratory test shows that the active ingredient of the drug or the contraband, narcotic contraband or narcotic substance is only 5 to 10%, and rest other is not in fact the active ingredient. And on these grounds, it was sought on behalf of the accused that now it can be considered that what is found at the instance of the accused is a small quantity and not the commercial quantity at all. The Supreme Court has resolved this issue in view of the findings in the above decision, and the decision in Michael Raj versus Intelligence Officer, Narcotic Control Bureau has been treated as not a good law. Now, prior to concluding and putting an end to the present lecture, and prior to giving some time for the question and answer session, once again, I thank Advocate Nikhil for this opportunity and sharing my thoughts on the subject. Also, last but not least, I must say that my son Amrut Doshi, an advocate, has also taken immense pains in dealing with the various pronouncements of the Apex Court and is of much help to me for preparing this lecture from thoughts. Now I request Nikhil to open the question and answer session if there are any questions which can be answered.
Sure.
Nikhil, can you hear
Thank
me?
you so
Yes.
Yes, thank you so much for such a wonderful lecture. I've been receiving a number of messages on and off the session. Now,
Nikhil, one thing
before
I want to say, whether I have taken more time than what is expected by you, or it is not so.
uh,
No,
we are
because it
absolutely
is
glad
running
for
for
the
more
time
than 1.5 hours.
because I mean this is a great thing that we have done about 1.5 hours. That
Yes.
is about 90 minutes. So that's a great thing. I mean, we have covered almost all the aspects that people want to know about the NDPS Act. So it's time perfectly utilized for everyone who participated in the meeting. Now we have a few questions that have come in during the session. I'll just go on asking the questions one by one.
Okay.
So the first question is, does CRPC apply? Does the Criminal Procedure Code apply to the action taken under NDPS Act? Or is it NDPS Act is a code in itself?
No, the provisions of CRPC are also equally applicable. In fact, apart from the offences under the NDPS Act, the procedure, as already told, that so far as the search and seizure and the search of a person is concerned, the officer has to take recourse to section 100 and 154 of the Criminal Procedure Code also. Though those two sections are not termed as the mandatory sections, though section 50 is mandatory of the NDPS Act, still the provisions of the Criminal Procedure Code are applicable.
All right.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you so much. So the next question is whether a confession under section 67 of NDPS Act admissible in evidence or not?
That is what just I think we discussed. The said aspect is now pending before the apex court, as we have already dealt this during the lecture.
Right. All right. Thank you so much. So the next question is, does section 12 of the Juvenile Justice Act override the provisions of section 37 of the NDPS Act? Because there are a number of cases in juveniles. That's why this question is being asked.
No, as I understand, if the accused is juvenile, they need to be tried by the juvenile court.
All right.
Yes.
Okay. So the Juvenile Justice Act will prevail.
Yes, right.
All right. Thank you so much. The next question is, with the amendment, will the process of narcotics control get transferred from the states to the central government?
No, 1 minute. Can you please repeat?
The question is, after the amendment, will the process of narcotics control get transferred from the states to the central government?
No, even the state machinery is also empowered, because there is also a cell of the local police, that is narcotic cell, and they are also taking the investigation and matters. Only in some cases there are ramifications of the international character. Then in that
Right.
event.
All right. Okay. Thank you so much.
Yes.
So the next question is, does the NDPS Act apply to Jammu and Kashmir?
It applies. It applies.
It does.
Yes.
All right.
Because there are certain notifications also.
All right.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. The next question is, would NDPS apply to a ship which is unregistered in India if the ship is found offshore? Because the Act says that it should apply to aircraft and the ships which are registered in India. But what would happen if a ship is found offshore and it is unregistered in India?
If the accused person is of Indian national, and still if it is offshore, then it is applicable to the Indian nationals.
All right. Okay.
And if it is within the territory of India, anybody, even if a foreign national, then also he is subjected to our act, our law.
All right. Okay. Thank you so much. The next question is,
there is one on this aspect. I will just give some reference to one matter. My another colleague judge was dealing with the matter having international ramifications, and it was a case of the delivery of the contraband from outside India, and it was brought within India. The accused persons were foreign nationals, and they were nabbed in the Hotel Taj in Mumbai. And in fact, it was a case initially initiated by the investigating agencies of United States, and they informed our local Narcotic Control Bureau officers in Delhi and then in Mumbai. And then the accused persons were shadowed by their officers. Their one officer came along with the accused persons without knowing the accused that they have been followed. The said officer from the foreign investigative agency also took part in the investigation in the present matter and assisted the local investigating agency, that is the Narcotic Control Bureau in India. This was one of the matters which were dealt with by my another colleague, friend, who are dealing with the NDPS matters.
Right. All right. Thank you so much.
Yes.
The next question is, when are the NDPS cases triable by magistrate?
NDPS cases are to be tried by the special court. There are special courts established.
Right. So it never goes.
The special judge is always to be a session judge or additional session judge, but initially his powers are those of the magistrate, but still he also holds the powers as the session judge.
All right. Okay. Thank you so much. The next question is, if traces of any drug are found within the blood samples of a person, if the person takes the defense that he was not aware that the food or the drink he had contained any drugs, then would the burden be on the prosecution to prove the case, or would it be on the defense?
No. If at all any intoxicant is found in the blood, then apparently it is a case of consumption.
Right.
Beyond consumption, there cannot be any charge on this person. It will be only under section 27. Now the question will be whether it is willful consumption or by mistake he has taken some drug and it is now found in his bloodstream. Then that depends upon the facts and circumstances of the case, the antecedents if at all, and the character of that person, whether he is under medication. It is also to be proved by him. If under prima facie, if at all the blood sample found that there are certain narcotic traces are there, then definitely it is for the accused to establish otherwise, that he was on some medication under the medical advice, and as such he is not a habitual or not consuming any narcotic drug or narcotic contraband. Yes.
Right. All right. The next question is, the procedures about search of a person, would the procedures also apply to a vehicle if the vehicle is found to
the simple answer to this
carry any?
Yes. The simple answer is, if there is only a search of the vehicle, then section 50 will not apply.
All right. Okay. Thank you so much.
Because there were so many cases which I can say that apart from the personal search, the vehicle of a person is also searched, and under the seat, driver's seat, ganja or charas are being found. Then in such cases, there is no need for the person to be informed as to his rights under section 50. If it is on the vehicle search. Yes.
All right. Okay. Thank you so much. So the next question is,
and even that aspect has been dealt with by us during our lecture, that if there are two types of recoveries, one from the vehicle or from the house or office, and one from the person. If at all there is non-compliance of section 50, then if at all the recovery on the person of a person is not considered as valid and it is gone, still the recovery from the vehicle or the shop can be enough to sustain the charge.
All right. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
The next question is, it is even now it is almost impossible to get bail if commercial quantity is found under
Yes.
NDPS. Can you give some tips how to overcome this hardship of not getting a bail? How to argue the case for getting the bail?
No, we will. The person has to say that your client. Firstly, they have to hamper on the evidence of the prosecution during the investigation, that how that contraband has been recovered. If it is established that it is recovered from the possession of the accuser, from his custody or from his house or vehicle, then definitely he is in. There is no scope for him to escape the liability. Only he can hamper that he has nothing to do with this house. Here I remember one case, if the time may allow, within 1 minute I will say that during the tenure when I was dealing with the NDPS matters,
Right.
in one of the matters, it was so happened that some narcotic contraband was found stocked on the bathroom loft of one flat in the Bandra government quarters. That is in fact a very strange scenario. And
Right.
it was two ghani bags were found containing 500 or 400 kilograms of charas.
All right.
The owner of that flat, not owner, in fact, it was the government quarters, they were allotted to the government employees. The government
Right.
employee was then by that time had retired, still he was in occupation of the flat.
All right.
During the course of the investigation and filing of the charge sheet, this person was not arraigned as an accused person and only other accused persons were named. Then it so happened that one police officer who took charge of the said case after the retirement of the earlier officer, this another officer made an application before me and said that Mr. XYZ, who was the ex-government employee, was in occupation of that premises during the time of the raid, and with his connivance, in fact, after asking him, we had seized those gunny bags. Now he being in possession of that flat, why not it be considered that he was in conscious possession of what was contained in the bags? Then in fact, I allowed that application. Of course, hereafter subsequently what happened to that matter, that I don't know, because as the time lapses, the matter linger, and then I was transferred from that place and then ultimately was elevated to the High Court. But the fact remains that it was a matter of then facts and the circumstances to be proved before the trial court, that that man has to say that though he allowed legally or illegally for somebody else to stock his gunny bags on the loft of the flat, which was in my possession given by the government during my service, still I had no idea of the contents of the said contraband. That was a question of facts, in fact. So a person can take a plea that he had no conscious possession of that material.
All right.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
I think we have covered all the questions. Thank you so much for the time spent with us. Thank you so much for enriching us so much. And not only you, I also thank Amrut, because I'm aware
Yes,
of
right.
the effort that he has taken for about a couple of days.
Yes.
It was very nice to have you as a speaker in the lecture series.
See, one thing I must say that I looked this aspect of giving a lecture or sharing my thoughts from the perspective of being a judge for 21 years, and I prepared myself on those lines. Then subsequently it so happened that in fact I am talking to the advocates also, and in fact the advocates, and they need something to be told regarding what are the defenses to be taken and what is the case, how the case is to be demolished. also from the side of the prosecutors, it must be to their knowledge that how the case can be developed. So ultimately, on this aspect, there was huge assistance rendered by my son. And then being a advocate, then he pointed out various things to me, and then it also happened that I have delivered my lecture as per my experience in the field and experience before the court also in these matters.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. In fact, before this lecture series, I had in fact appeared before you in one of the arbitration proceedings, and it was absolute delight to appear before you. I could very well say that time that you are a good listener for the advocate, and now I can say that you are a great speaker also. So thank you so much for spending your time and for enlightening us. Thank you so much.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Thank you all. Yes.
Thank you.